Are you really following God? Do you truly know what God is calling us to do? Here we're going to explain the importance of the Old Testament and the New Testament and how they go along together, and how we're not just living on the new covenant, but how we're actually still using the Old Testament, the old writings of the prophets, the law of Moses, to still fulfill and practice our following when we follow Christ. God used the prophets in the Old Testament to announce and to teach specifically the laws of God. The New Testament reveals Jesus fulfilling the teachings and the writings of the prophets. Jesus defeated sin. He did not abolish the Old Testament, but showed us how to follow and obey the laws and the commands of God. Christ defeated sin and brought freedom for us, so we are no longer forced to follow God's commands, but rather have been shown love to choose to follow God or not. Jesus did not come to abolish the law of Moses, rather he abolished the sacrifices that were used before as forgiveness and atonement for their sins. Jesus never wanted that, so he became the ultimate sacrifice for our sins. He wanted us to show mercy, not offer sacrifices as they were doing before because of the law. We can compare the Old Testament and the New Testament to today's regulations of today's world. The Old Testament resembles the laws we all as citizens must abide in. We can choose to follow some of the laws, but if we don't follow all of the laws, there are consequences for our actions, right? The government resembles freedom, right? The USA government resembles freedom, right? So now we have freedom to either follow the laws that are set in place or not to. But now there is freedom and a choice to do so, whether there's consequences or not. But there are consequences for choosing not to follow these laws in today's world, right? Like you will get thrown into prison, or you will have to go to court and face the judge, right? So there are still laws in place. Though there is a government, there is freedom, there is still a law that's been set in place that we still must abide in to follow and to keep everything in peace and organic construction. So there's not people doing whatever they want to do, but there is foundation of what we're supposed to do. It makes it easier for all of us to live. Let's say Jesus is the government. He has set us free from sin, but there is still a law that's been set in place to obey. He is giving us freedom now. He purchased us with his blood. So now we are no longer forced or obligated to follow God's commands, to follow God, but he is giving us freedom. With his death, he has defeated sin. He's defeated the sacrifices that were used before. So now we are forgiven by the blood, and we have a teacher now, an example on who to follow, on how to follow God's perfect commands. But that does not for 1 second abolish the law of God. So now there is still consequences to breaking that law. Whether you choose to or not, there are consequences for that. As read in Matthew 5, verse 17, do not misunderstand why I have come. So we must not, as he told us, we must not